All right, wrapping up the final week of the 30 Books in 30 Days challenge with my 1001 book countdown. Let's get to it. Hi everyone, I'm Sandy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have 1001 book countdown for you, but it is a special one because it is the conclusion of the 30 books in 30 days version of this, where I've been trying to read 30 books in the month of September. I have published a short every day with those, and so hopefully you've been following along with those, but I will leave a link to the playlist in the description below for you so you can go and see all of those shorts if you would like to. I had a lot of fun doing shorts. This is my first experience doing shorts, and it was different. So, but for today, I am going to wrap up my 1001 book countdown with the books that I read during the last week of September. If you're not familiar with the 1001 book countdown, I will leave a card up here for you where you can go and check out the original video. I am reading books off of the 1001 books you must read before you die list, which has been a passionate project of mine for a number of years, and I've just been slowly working my way through this list. I started documenting it out here on YouTube a couple of years ago and really liking that process. I like having a video record of all of what I've thought of all of the books because I have a pretty bad memory at times. But hopefully you will consider giving me a subscribe and sticking with me and seeing how far I make it on this massive journey that I have planned for myself. I think it's been an experience. All right, but for today, what we will go ahead and do is put up the numbers, which are 853, which is the total I have left out of all of the books that I have on the massive challenge, and 19. Now, every year at the beginning of the year, I pre-select 52 books and see if I can make my way through them and get that number down to 0. I have not been successful any year prior to now, and at the beginning of this month, it didn't look too promising because I had over 30 left, but with the 30 books in 30 days challenge, I have carved out a huge number of those, and so that number right now sits at 19. And I do have a substantial update for today because I was on vacation for the last week of September and I read a boatload. So I'm really excited to share these with you and see how we get on with this. But let's start with the first book. The first book is The Green Man by Kingsley Amis. Kingsley Amis actually has 3 books on the 1001 book countdown. This is the first one that I have read. I was really looking forward to this particular book, and unfortunately it was a bit of a disappointment for me. It was originally published in the 1960s, and I think for today there's some themes in it that just don't necessarily work for me personally. This particular character I found deplorable in it, and it's also one of those books that's going to escape me after a period of time. The part that I will remember about this particular book is there's a main character in it whose father passes away, and within 24 hours of his father passing away, he's wanting to have sex with his wife and then also having sex with someone else, and then wanting the two of them to have sex together. And that's the bulk of this that I will remember. There is a component of it that seems kind of supernatural where she may or may not be seeing a ghost, and there may be some statue or figurine that has to be dealt with. It's just odd. I wanted to love Kingsley Amis. I thought this was going to be hilarious. I had big ideas that this was going to be a hilarious book. Nope, wasn't funny. Didn't make me laugh out loud even one particular time. I was so disappointed by this one, but I am glad that I have it finished. I do have Lucky Gem sitting over on my shelf that will probably end up on the 2024 TBR, so we'll see if I'm more successful with that one. I know that one is a bit more popular than this one. I had never heard of this book prior to reading it, so I don't know. This one was probably in the 2-star, 1.5 to 2-star rating for me. Yeah, it just didn't work for me. With this book, we do get to go from 853 to 852, and thankfully it was on my 2023 list, so that number goes from 19 down to 18. The next book that I have for you is this one, The Music of Chance by Paul Auster. Paul Auster actually has 7 books on the 1001 book countdown, and I have read, this will make my 5th one. Now, I did read these a number of years ago, and I honestly don't remember much about them, so I went into this book a little bit blind, not really knowing what to expect out of this one. It is a book that I have tried to read multiple times, put down, pick back up, and just couldn't quite get into it. I did end up getting pulled into it this time for some reason. This time it worked for me. This book was originally published in 1990 and was actually adapted into a film in 1993. This book starts out with a character whose name is Jim Nash, and Jim has come into a little bit of money and has decided to quit his job as a fireman and travel the world, travel the United States really, not even the world, driving from place to place and really not doing much, just kind of going wherever he wants and doing whatever he wants, and slowly the money is dwindling away. And then a moment of chance, kind of this music of chance, where he meets a character on the side of the road who is a bit disreputable when you just meet him for the first time, kind of a young guy. And he gets Jim Nash, his name is Jack Posey, and he gets poor Jim Nash into all kinds of trouble. And poor Jack Posey does tend to get into a bit of misfortune rather frequently, it seems like. And Jim Nash just goes along with everything and decides to back young Jack in a poker game. And let's just say it does not go well. And then the book takes a really weird twist. And so I don't really want to talk about kind of like that whole part of it, because it's just strange what happens after that. And I am not quite sure how I feel about that particular component of the book. And the end is pretty shocking. Like I didn't see the end coming. However, I did like this book quite a bit, far more than I expected to. It did have some twists and turns to it, and it had a couple characters that I thought were really fascinating. I just am not sure about middle of the book towards the end how I really feel about this. I think it ended up right about in the kind of the 3-star range for me, as it was good but not great. So, but with this book, we do get to go from 852 to 851, and it was on my 2023 list. So it gets to go from 18 down to 17, getting closer to being able to get that number to 0 this year. After that, I went on to read a very short book, which was Blind Owl by Sadek Hadayat. This is an Iranian author, and this book was originally published in Persian in 1937 and was translated into English in 1957. You see, it's a short little book here. It is very lyrical in style, very interesting book, very incredibly dark. I see right from the cover on this book, these eyes, this beautiful cover, by the way. I think this is absolutely gorgeous with that flower and those creepy, creepy eyes. The eyes do have something to do in the story, at least the first part of the story. It's kind of broken into 2 parts, so mine doesn't explicitly stop and start from one to the other, but the perspective definitely changes in this particular book. And it kind of is almost like this opium-driven fever dream at the beginning. And I wasn't 100% sure what in the world was going on with this dark, twisty, mysterious, interesting characters, blood and guts, fascinating. Don't really know what happened, if that makes any sense. But it was an interesting read, and I think it's one that I need to go back and reread again, because I don't feel like I can fully consume it in one reading, because there's so much to it, and it is truly beautiful, but oh my goodness, it is all over the place as far as how dark and disturbing it is. But with this book, we do get to go from 851 to 850, but it was not on my 2023 list. That number has to stay at 17. The next book that I ended up picking up was Kitchen from Banana Yoshimoto. This is the only book that Banana Yoshimoto has on the 1001 book countdown. It was originally published in 1988 and then translated into English in 1993. This book has a young woman in it who has recently lost a family member, and so it has a lot to do with grief and dealing with grief. And the kitchen is her place of joy, her place of happiness. And it is so beautiful. It is just wonderfully done, very calming and relaxing. A perfect book following Blind Owl, because this did not have any of the same just confusion to it that Blind Owl had. And it just had characters you just wanted to kind of take in and give a hug to, it felt like. Or that's what this book feels a lot like a hug. And this book was very unexpected for me. I didn't go into it with really knowing or understanding anything about it, but it truly was a very lovely read. There is a set kind of in part of this too. She does end up meeting some other characters or going with some other characters that, that part for me wasn't as effective. I really liked it when I was with her in her kitchen. Those were my favorite kind of parts of this particular book. It ended up being kind of in the 3 to 4 star range for me. So it was good, but not at the 5-star level. Again, I did enjoy reading this one though. With this book, we do get to go from 850 to 849, so I'm in the 840s, yay! But it was not on my 2023 list. So with this, it stays at 17. All right, and the next one that I have is actually a bind-up of 3 books, and it is Samuel Beckett's 3 novels, Malloy, Malone Dies, and The Unnameable. This is often called the trilogy, or the or the Beckett trilogy. They are often read together, which is how I read them. And so I will talk about them kind of one at a time, but really not separating them too much as I go through these particular books. Samuel Beckett actually has 7 books on the 1001 book countdown. The book was written in the late 1940s, early 1950s. There's a bit of conflicting information out there online when I went and looked up publication dates, and is often, like I said, published together like this bind up is. And they do interconnect a little bit, but they're 100% the same style of book, which unfortunately is stream of consciousness. The first, it opens with Malloy. And Malloy, in that book, you have a character who's named Malloy, and he just is on this long, rambling piece about trying to find his mom, but not trying to find his mom, and he has a leg that's not working. It's just this long stream of consciousness piece, just continual text of being in this guy's mind of Malloy nonstop, and it was a lot. Now, I will say that I laughed out loud for parts of Malloy. I was very surprised by that because I'm not a huge fan of stream of consciousness. I actually struggle a lot with it, but I did end up getting the audiobook and doing a full immersion experience with actually all 3 books. And that really helped me kind of get into the flow of reading a stream of consciousness and understanding a bit more of kind of like how to interpret it, because in my own head when I read it, it's just too disjointed. My brain can't follow it. But when I was listening to it and reading it, it made a lot more sense. So Malloy is actually broken into 2 different parts. The first part is Malloy, and the second part is someone who may or may not be trying to find Malloy. I don't know that that character actually had a name. And in the end, does he actually ever find Malloy? Unclear at this particular point in time. But as far as stream of consciousness goes, it's actually one that I enjoyed far more than some of the other ones that I have tried. Very surprising, but it is a lot. I recommend this book. I would say definitely try it with the audiobook if you're not used to stream of consciousness like me, because it might help get into the particular book. But with Malloy, we do get to go from 849 to 848, and thankfully it was on my 2023 list, so that number gets to go from 17 down to 16. So the second book in this bind-up is called Malone Dies, and Malone is the main character of that section, and it is really, you're in his brain the entire time, and he is in some type of facility, some type of hospital where he is dying essentially, or we think he's dying, he may be dying, but again, you're going through this long drawn out conversation in his head about everything that he's doing while he's laying there. There's how he relieves himself, how he gets his food, the characters in the book, or the characters in the facility, all of those different places. A lot about death and grieving in it, but again, still very stream of consciousness and style. Not as heavy with that as it was in the first book, though. So there was a bit more dialogue in it, though there's still no punctuation as far as quotes when someone is speaking. It doesn't have any of that, but it was, again, entertaining, and there were components of Malone Dies that also made me laugh out loud. Again, surprise, but I did have the audiobook to help me kind of get into it, but I did read and listen at the same time to this particular one. So with Malone Dies, I get to go from 849 to 848, and thankfully it was also on my 2023 list, so that number gets to go from 16 down to 15. So now we go to the last book, The Unnameable. The Unnameable is probably my least favorite in some ways of the 3 in this trilogy. It is a big, long, rambling mess of stream of consciousness. And at one point, there's a section of this book that has multiple pages with no periods. It's just a long, drawn out sentence with commas in it that break up the thoughts, but it is a lot to handle. It is probably, as far as someone who doesn't like stream of consciousness, it is really a lot to try and handle. So in that particular book, you have kind of an unnamed character, which I guess makes sense with the title of The Unnameable. And he does reference Malloy. He does reference Malone a little bit, but then he also talks about someone named Mahood. He talks about that may or may not be Malloy, that may or may not be Malone, which may or may not be the person who's looking for Malloy in the first part of the book. There's also something weird through like all 3 that the characters have a problem with their leg. I'm not sure what that is or why that is. But this one, like I said, the last part of this particular book is 100% just a line of text with no breaks, with not even a period in there. And for me, it was just too much. I said, I like the first two books in this trilogy far more than The Unnameable. We'll just go with that. I mean, I'm glad I read Beckett. I can't say I love Beckett, but as far as a stream of consciousness goes, it's probably the most effective one that I have read. But again, I don't know if I would have found it as effective had I not been listening to it at the same time as reading it. Not sure, but I have a few more Beckett books to read for, I think. So we'll see how I feel about this author going forward. But with this book, we do get to go from 848 to 847. With this book, we do get to go from 847 to 846, and it was not on my 2023 list. So that number actually stays at 15, and that is where I get to end. So having 15 left definitely makes it seem like, okay, it is now reasonable that I could read 5 books per month for the next 3 months and get that 2023 number down to 0. We'll see though. I mean, it's still quite a bit to read in there, and I don't know for sure if I'm going to be able to get it done, but I feel much more optimistic about it. This was an amazing week with 7 books. I think it was 7 books. With 7 books in it, but the only way I was able to read that much is because I was on vacation and I had a couple of long flights and a couple of long train rides that all I did was read during that time. Because if I was home, I don't think I would have been able to make as much progress as I did. So it was absolutely wonderful to be able to focus and to be able to read as much as I did while on vacation. I'm still not sure though whether or not I'm going to make it down to 0 for this year. But that is what I have for you for the 1001 book countdown for today. I have started The Accidental by Alice Smith, but I haven't made too much progress on it. So we'll see how far I get in that before I pick up something else. And outside of that, the only other book I have planned to pick up this week from the countdown is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, which is my 1001 book club pick for what month is it? October. So hopefully you'll consider joining the book club. The link to the Discord is in the description below for you. And that is what I have for you. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, thanks everyone. Bye.